Okay, so as we said, welcome to Get on the Soundtrack, your music in movies, TV shows, and more. My name is Andrew King, editor of Canadian Musician Magazine, and joining me for this session is Dondrea Erauw from Instinct Entertainment. Just a little bit of info before I hand it over to Dondrea with our first question here, but yeah, Instinct Entertainment is a music supervision firm based in Toronto. She and her colleagues have worked placing music, popular songs or recorded music into a number of TV shows, movies, and some corporate videos, digital media projects, and things along those lines. But the specialty is in television and film. Shows that a lot of people would know: Degrassi on Netflix and the Family Channel, Cracked, Open Heart, Beauty and the Beast. Films like Arbitrage starring Richard Gere, and we'll actually see Richard in a moment. And as I said, I edit Canadian Musician. We've been hosting these webinars over the last few months and do a lot of speaking engagements and whatnot. So I'll just pause briefly, and I want to show you, before we get started with the rest of the session, a quick reel on Instinct Entertainment's site. Now, the audio for this won't be as good as if you were streaming it yourself. So head over both to check out the reel, but for more information about Instinct, the URL is instinctentertainment.ca. You can get a bit more info on the shows and projects that Dondrea and her colleagues are working on. And we'll give you a quick idea as to the work they do right now.
Just one more chance to prove it's you alone I care for. Just one more night. And I'm not sleeping now. The dark is too hard to bear. And I'm not keeping the stress. The light stop me down too slow. Show me when I'm alone. Come on, damn it, I need you alive. I'm betting on my chips. I'm gonna get it somehow. Yeah, you can count on this. I'm gonna get better. Oh, have you seen my ghost? See my ghost, see my ghost. Oh, have you seen my ghost? Staring at the ground. Na 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 na. As we skate through outer space, it's hot out here tonight, girl. Your honey's peppers on your eyes. I gotta swing to any way you move. Really wet my
You ever telling me that we had each other's backs? Well, if you bail on me now, you're breaking that pact. Our pact.
I don't care about our pact, London. Just give me my helmet.
Just promise me that I'll see you tomorrow.
London.
Just promise me you won't quit, Hud.
There's a wildfire set to light.
I'm so quick.
There's a wildfire. when we started in your last road, and have been.
So back with you, and beg your pardon, I realized that for the first a good chunk of that, you weren't able to see the video, but we got into that, and better time now to, or no better time than now to plug the site again, instinctentertainment.ca. You can see the full reel and the picture that so well accompanies the music you heard. Lots of Canadian content there, which is great, especially since we're speaking to a largely Canadian audience about how they can get their songs into movies, TV shows, and more. Dondrea, fellow film supervisors or music supervisors, are the gatekeepers to these opportunities. So without further ado, let's hear from her and start talking about ways that you can get into the projects she works on. So there we go. Dondrea, you're with us, eh?
I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Brilliant. So I guess start us off here. We gave a little bit of info about what Instinct Entertainment does as a firm, placing music into movies and TV shows to fit the scene and relay the emotion that the directors or folks want. But you can give us a better idea. Tell us a bit about your day-to-day and the responsibilities that a music supervisor like you handles.
Yeah, so the day-to-day, well, the cool thing about being a supervisor is that one day of work is never the same. So it's always changing. It's very exciting. There's lots happening. There's lots going on. So basically, we're responsible for managing projects, anything to do with the music related to the series. So sometimes we work with the composer, and sometimes we help the directors and producers find the composers. And then obviously we are responsible for all of the licensed material in a project. So basically we read scripts for our projects. Sometimes there's music notes in that, and we can get an idea as to a song that the writers are wanting to place. And we can either go ahead and start negotiating and clearing those tracks, or we can look for alternate replacement songs. We directly deal with the music editors on the show and picture editors, obviously. So we are sending them music daily for the episodes that they're working on or the film. And yeah, so from there we kind of help navigate the episode or the project, and once the songs have been chosen from the songs that we've sent, we go ahead and start negotiating the fees and the songs with the owners of the music, the master and publishing, which we can get into in a little bit. And from there, we just have to kind of work within a budget. We have an idea as to like how much we get to work with up front, and then, you know, we have to keep an eye on, if it's a TV series, we have to keep an eye on how much we're spending an episode, and sometimes some episodes will be higher in fees than others, so we have to keep that in mind. And yeah, so then from there we kind of work with, you know, all kinds of different people, record labels, publishers, and independent artists, managers, and all of those kinds of things. And then we go to what are called spotting and playback sessions as well, which is really cool and kind of less to do with the actual music industry side and more to do with the film side, where we actually go to the studios and we get to hear the full mixes, surround sound and whatnot, and we sit with the actual mixers of the episode, and the producers are sometimes there, but for sure, and then directors. And we kind of break down the whole episode, and we go through all the notes and make sure everybody's happy with all of, you know, weird things like the dialogue and the sound effects and the music. And from there, they press it, and then away it goes. And so obviously there's a lot of other back-end things to it too, like making sure that cue sheets are filled out and the admin stuff is finalized. We do a lot of paperwork here as well. There's a lot of supervision companies that just do clearances and or just creative, and they have a different company do all the paperwork and the negotiating. But here at Instinct, we do both of those things. So we have to make sure that we have all of the paperwork done as well. So the supervision world here at Instinct is, I would say, like probably 60% paperwork and the rest is probably creative, to be honest. But that just depends how many projects we have going. So
we appreciate the honesty and the peek behind the curtain, I suppose. But now, yeah, we're going to kind of zoom things over and focus more so on the creators and the folks attending and help you, like we said we were going to do, get your music into these types of projects. And I'm really excited that we have Dondrea with us because Instinct Entertainment, as you heard in the reel, again, instinctentertainment.ca for that. They do work with a lot of Canadian artists, and I know for a fact that Dondrea scours, is always looking for independent sound. So it's not just the well-known artists that get these opportunities. And another quick note, we're already getting some good questions here. About halfway through the session, we'll have a slide come up with questions, and feel free to send via the question fields that you've got in front of you in your interface. We'll go through a few at that point, especially the ones that relate to something we've already covered. But if we don't get to your question, don't worry. At the end of the session, we'll open it up for a longer question period. And there's actually been some good ones already that I know for a fact will be answered fairly shortly. So let's sit tight for that and carry on with the session here. So yeah, Dondrea, tell us a bit about the different types of opportunities. Obviously, we've got them listed here, but also a bit about, like, is there any limit to the types of genres or styles that you're after? Is there anything too obscure? Tell us a little bit about, I guess, the material that you're looking for and the opportunities that you're looking to fill with that material.
Sure, yeah. So because we at Instinct here, we mostly do television, there's supervisors for all different kinds of things. Some do or just strictly advertisement, and some do, video games and things like that, or a mixture of television and film. But we mostly do television, so we're always looking for new music, and a lot of our shows vary in different styles, which, I always encourage people to do their research and look online to see what their favorite shows, like what kind of music is being placed in that and who the supervisor is, because it's really easy to just look on IMDb and find out who that person is. And if you feel like your music would fit in a specific show that you really love, it's always really good to do that research and find that stuff out. But for us, we genre-wise, we kind of mostly use a lot of pop music, a lot of singer-songwriter, a lot of indie rock, a lot of emotional, broody electronic music. There's a lot of instances where there's cafe scenes and I need acoustic tracks. There's a lot of things like lounge bars where I place a lot of library music. So we work with a lot of library people. So even instrumental type music, we use a lot of things like that. Sometimes it's jazz, sometimes it's loungy, hip music. Yeah, that's kind of the majority of it. But there's weird instances where I need like a heavy metal track or I need a country song. And those are definitely like smaller windows of genres that I place. But, when they come up, I do have to be prepared to send tracks for stuff like that. So our library is full of all different types of genres. And I like to make sure that I have a little bit of everything in case something like that comes up. And yeah. Hopefully that answers the question.
Oh, absolutely. And to folks listening, please keep your questions coming in. There's some great ones here I'm excited to get to. A last point on this slide, too, that I'll just jump on is that, to be clear, with this, we're talking about getting music placed and licensed that's like existing pre-recorded music. The other half to, and I guess it might be bigger than a half, but often when you think film, TV, you're thinking of scoring or composing music that is purposely purposefully created to suit the action going on in a film or piece of media, versus in this case taking something that's already recorded and out there and placing it into that media. I guess I was a bit clunky there. But let's get on to the next slide here. And I think this is a big one that we often get asked a lot through the magazine, and I'm sure Dondrea hears it, but talking about compensation. And obviously this is the major part of it. There's tons of promo that comes with a placement in a well-known piece of media, but as artists, we're also looking to make some money. So, Dondrea, can you break down the different licenses that you have to get cleared to be able to use a piece of music and what that entails?
Yeah, for sure. So, with every piece of music that we license, we have to license what's called the master and the publishing. So, for every song, somebody out there owns the recorded actual version of the song, and then somebody out there actually wrote it. So those are two very separate things, and we have to clear both sides of those things. So for an independent artist or a singer-songwriter, you would most likely own 100% of your material, meaning that you would own your masters and you would own your publishing. There's instances, obviously, where especially if you're a songwriter, you co-write with a lot of people, and some of those people might have publishing deals. And so if there's 2 or 3 writers on a song, we have to make sure we go to all 3 of those writers. If they have publishers, we have to reach out to those publishing companies to make sure we clear 100% of the publishing, as well as the people who own the actual physical recording, which could be a record label or could be the artists themselves. So, I mean, in hip hop, it's very difficult because there's a lot of writers, and sometimes there's samples. And if there's samples in songs, we have to make sure we go and clear the original sample as well as, the track we're trying to clear. So we try to stay away from those kinds of things because it can get very pricey very quickly. And also it's just messy to do the paperwork, and especially for film, we just don't really have the time to hear back from everybody. So yeah, but initially you'll get a fee for a master and you'll get a fee for a publishing. So if you own both sides of those things, you would get 100% of the sync fee, which is super helpful for independent artists and songwriters, because nobody is taking that cut away from you. If you have, for example, like I said, another writer on the song, you have to split that publishing fee with that other writer. So a lot of people ask, if I'm in a band, does that mean I have to split the money up with my bandmates? And it's usually, we give 100% of that fee to you, and then whatever you decide to do with the money is how that would work. But it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. If people have questions about it, we can talk about it more.
There actually is one related to what you were just speaking about, and you may have just kind of answered it there, but what percentage of the music you use requires new use payments to the musicians that are on the recording? Or like more specifically, the invoice license that pays the musicians that are on the recording? Is that something that you administer, or is that at a different level?
Okay, so this is coming up more and more often as of lately with union session players and AF/M writers in the US. And this is a topic that, ironically, all the music supervisors in Toronto are getting together next week to talk about, because it's a fee that we have to start taking into consideration on top of our sync fees now. And we are not responsible for any of the payments. So basically what happens is the production companies that we get hired from, so let's say, example, like Degrassi, Epitome Pictures is who hires Instinct Entertainment. So we get paid from them to work on the season. And then they have a music budget. So what happens is they are the ones who actually send the checks out to the master and publishing owners. So we don't actually have anything to do with the payment process, and we don't ever take a percentage from any of the sync fees either. But this AF/M and the union session players that are on tracks are now is actually now something that these production companies are having to pay themselves on top of these sync fees. So now we're having to sort of try to find a way to implement that into our budgets now, which gets a little tricky because not everybody is aware of any of the session players on songs like that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So it can be a surprise to production companies to kind of get an invoice in the mail for these kinds of things because they have to pay them, of course. And as, you know, musicians should be paid. It's just another kind of hurdle we have to figure out and that we're continuing to figure out. And yeah, I hope that that somewhat answers the question, but it's a little bit of a tricky situation as of right now.
Right on.
In regards to sync.
Appreciate the insight, the info. So yeah, budgets and negotiations. You'd mentioned that you're working with different budgets with different projects, goes without saying. So it might be tough to give a ballpark figure, but like looking at some of the lower budget projects that you're working on versus some of the larger, when it comes to, you know, say I've got a song and you're going to be using 15, 30 seconds of it. There's a lot of variance in here, but give us an idea as to what someone can expect, the rights holder to that song can expect to be paid.
Sure, yeah. Obviously, it varies from the project we're working on, if it's a Canadian project or if it's a US budget or if it's an independent film or whatnot, like that always is something we have to take into consideration, and artists too. But if, you know, a background use for a Canadian project, we could pay anywhere from like 500 Canadian to 750 Canadian. And that's what we call all in. So that is how much we would pay for the master and the publishing in total. So if it was 500, we'd pay 250 for the master and 250 for publishing for a background use. And that's something that's going to be, you know, under dialogue that you hear in a cafe or in a restaurant or, you know, in a shop or something like that. Feature uses on Canadian stuff, we typically try to clear it for 1,000 all in, so 500 for master, 500 for pub. But that's independent artist. You know, sometimes if someone's signed to a Canadian record label or they have a couple publishers attached, we have to negotiate with those people and kind of work out fees that are a little bit, you know, better for their pocket because they, you know, have to make money as well. So, and then, you know, those artists might be a little bit bigger as well. So, you know, if I'm going to place a City and Color track, I'm not going to be able to place anything from him for $1,000. It just is not in the budget for him to do projects like that. So, you know, we have producers reach out to us about wanting to use bigger artists, and we always have to reach out and see what the label is going to quote us, and we kind of have to take a number to the table and see if they'll work with us on it. And sometimes, you know, the fees are lower and sometimes they're higher, but we're always trying to, you know, help these artists out and get them what we can, and we're very honest about those kinds of things. And yeah, I mean, typically though, it's for independent artists, it's going to be anywhere from like the $500 to $1,000 range.
Right on. And as Dondrea mentioned earlier, the production is who will ultimately administer those funds via check or wire transfer, depending on their process. So we've got a bunch of questions here and a lot of good ones too. So Dondrea, without shortchanging anyone, hopefully we can kind of race through these.
We got time.
Yeah, there's some related to pitch too, which I know we're going to get to shortly, is talk about, first off, how you can make friends with Dondrea and her peers and get on their good graces. Again, they're the gatekeepers to these opportunities, and also share some tips on things you should not do. Horror stories always have a way of kind of sticking, maybe being better lessons. Yeah, so let's go here. So yeah, a lot of these are related to that, which we'll get to shortly. So what about, a few folks actually have been asking about websites like Hit License, Taxi. Some of them have you pay, you know, up to $5 for each submission. Do you use these sites, and what are your opinions on services like that?
Yeah, I don't ever really use sites like that. it's kind of a middle person to kind of what we're doing, and they're just going to take, I mean, I'm not necessarily against it, but I just feel like there's better ways to get your music out there than allowing someone to take a cut like that. If your music's good enough, first of all, supervisors are going to find it. And second of all, it's easier for you to make those connections yourself and make 100% of that fee than have to give it up to somebody who might not necessarily have all of the connections, like you won't either, but we don't really use those sites here. We have our go-to like music libraries and Pitch People, and I can talk about Pitch People and libraries and stuff like that as well, because those are really good connections for independent artists. There's a lot of them out there. I have a few favorites, but they're the people who basically represent an artist and pitch their music to music supervisors in a very professional manner. Mm-hmm. And in emails, and they know how supervisors like to collect their music. And, you know, they're people that supervisors like us go to all the time because we know their working habits, how quick they're going to be. They know our budgets really well. So those are the kinds of people that we try to go to because I just feel like they're treating artists a little bit better, and it's not just like a website that you can, I don't know, log into and just become a number in the system, if that makes any sense. More creative.
Right on. A quick shout out, our friend Alan Williard is joining us from the Canadian Federation of Musicians, and it was actually his question about the studio musicians, and he just wanted me to note that the AFM/CFM fees, that being the musicians union, are part of the master license when a track is acquired from a label or the proper rights holders there. And on that note, I've got a question. Dondrea, do songwriters or musicians need to be a member of Socan or in a union or any of the other rights collection agencies to have their music considered for play by you guys?
No, not at all. You don't have to be registered with Socan whatsoever. However, I highly recommend that you do, because Socan is a performance royalty collection agency. So anytime that an episode that you're in airs on television, you're going to be collecting money. Mm-hmm. It's not a lot, mind you. It's going to be, you know, a few cents, which adds to $1, which adds to a few more. But I've had a lot of people say it's called the back end. That's where royalties are collected. Can be significantly high for certain people. So you're not going to collect that money unless you register with Socan. Otherwise, it just is floating money that you'll never have. So you don't need to be registered with Socan to get a sync, but I highly recommend you do, because that's just more money for yourself.
Right on. And so back to the ballpark figure you'd use, you know, about the 500 that would be used for a track. Does that mean, someone's wondering if that means that they've signed away their publishing worldwide for that? Like, is it an exclusive use? Right.
So we do non-exclusive deals, which means that you are to continuously pitch and place your song anywhere else. We don't own any of the copyright. You still own 100% of everything. We usually do tend to clear for worldwide, but that's just the project that we're working on. That's you giving us permission to use the song we're thinking in the project we're using worldwide. And if that streams somewhere in the US or in Australia, you're just giving us the rights to stream that in other countries, which is very standard. Like, that's pretty typical in a clearing process right now. Unless you're like an advertisement, for example, like that's strictly usually geo-gated to the country that it's being licensed from. But television is usually cleared for worldwide, because you never know if it's going to be on Netflix, and you never know if it's going to be, you know, picked up in a different country, and it just saves us from having to go back to re-license tracks. So.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to one more here, and remember, folks, a longer Q&A at the end. So as we move forward to the new content feel free to ask questions, and I'll field those. We'll put them in front of Dondrea shortly. But last one before we move on, and related to what we've been talking about, Alexandria is wondering, is it worth it to hire a company like Tinderbox to license music on your behalf, especially under a non-exclusive agreement? As far as the approach of artists coming to you directly or using an intermediary like that, what do you recommend?
I don't really mind when artists reach out to me. Like I said before, like if the music is really good and you can conform a short and sweet email, which we can talk a little bit more about after these few questions, is like as long as that's, you know, well professionally put together and the music's good, I'm gonna listen to it and I'm gonna put it aside and hope to use it somewhere. So I don't necessarily think that you have to get somebody. But it also doesn't hurt if you're interested in just getting your music out there as much as possible. I would definitely make sure you're going to be doing a deal like that with somebody that you're comfortable with and you know has had success in those kinds of things. And you also want to make sure that the pitch company you're speaking to suits your music as well. You don't want to be agreeing to anything if your music doesn't necessarily suit the rest of the styles of stuff that they pitch. So it's good to just do the research and figure out, you know, what other type of artists are they working with and what's their success rate on these types of things. Just ask questions, and, you know, they're going to take a percentage from you if a placement does happen. So it's always really good to ask what that percentage is. But yeah, I mean, like we do deal with them and they're great. And there's been some success for artists in that route for sure. But I really don't have a problem with artists reaching out on behalf of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Bang on. So yeah, let's keep it going, because the majority of the questions are pertaining to ways, are pertaining to pitching to you, how to get, heard above the noise. And so why don't we let Dondrea tell us all about that? What do you want to see from people that are reaching out to you? Especially lots of the folks in our audience tonight are already sending questions and asking about how to reach you. So tell us a bit about how you like to be approached, what someone should be including when they reach out to you, and follow-ups at the bottom there, but walk us through it.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as you can imagine, we get a lot of people submitting music in a day. I spend the majority of my day downloading things, not only from record labels and pitch agents and stuff, but also artists and managers themselves. So we get just so many emails a day. And the best way that I can try to explain this is like, picture yourself just getting a bunch of spam. And I don't want to say spam in a negative way, but just a lot of emails from people you don't know. Like, how would you like to read an email, and how would you find somebody professional, and how would you be like, oh, I'm gonna actually listen to this, or I'm curious to hear what this sounds like, or this person seems really cool, I want to respond to them right away. We don't have necessarily all the time in the world to get back to everybody, but I always try to say short and sweet emails, like just be personal. And because I've gotten emails where it's like, hi there, here's my music, this is my life story. And it's just not very personal. Like, you could tell they copied and pasted that email to probably 15 other people. So, and then I've also had times where they put the wrong name in front of the email, and it's just not very professional at all. So
worst.
I always say, just even if you make a comment on something that they've worked on, like, this is really strange, and I don't like to associate too much with this kind of stuff, but like music supervisors tend to like to get their ego stroked. So, if there's like a certain TV show you watch, like that you really, really like, and that's really famous or something, and you want to email that person, it would never hurt to be like, oh man, I saw that you synced this band in this episode and it was really cool. You're connecting with that person that you're writing to. And even if you were to say, I noticed you've placed this band before, I really like them, I think that my music would fit this show, here's my material. It's always just helpful to somewhat be personal without giving your life story, because unfortunately we don't have all the time in the world to read paragraph upon paragraph. But Yeah, and besides that, it's really important to include a streaming link and a download link because every supervisor is different. And some people want to stream the music without downloading because if they don't like it, then they won't download it. And some people, like myself, for example, I like to download everything at once and then add it to my library at the end of the day. So in the morning, I can go through everything that's been pitched to me. And if it doesn't work or it's not a high quality production, I just delete it from my library. So it's always really good to give options to the person that you're sending it to, depending on, because you never know what they like. And if you're giving them options, then they're going to say, wow, this person really has their stuff together. This is a professional email. They're giving me options. It's also super important when you're sending these download links that they're MP3s and not WAV files, because WAV files, unfortunately, do not carry metadata over. MP3s are unfortunately the only thing that carries metadata over. I think MP4s might as well, but it's just easier to send MP3s in a zip file than WAVs anyways, because it takes a long time to load. But metadata is super, super, super important, and I can't stress it enough because, and I'll talk about what it is, but it's important to have because if we don't have a contact information embedded in the music, if I come across it in a year and it's perfect for what I'm working on and I can't find it in my email and I can't find it anywhere else in my computer, then I can't find out who owns the song, so I can't use it. And it's just really important to have it. So metadata, basically, if you're in iTunes and you right-click on your song and you push Get Info, there's a whole section in there that says comments and composers, and it's really important to put an email address and a phone number and whether or not you own all of your material. So if you do, you can say, you know, own 100% of my material, or what's called a one-stop. And one-stop just means we can email you directly and clear that song simply through you. If there's another writer on there, you can put their email address in there if you want. It's always super helpful. The more information we have, the better. Giving songwriters their names and the percentages is also super helpful because we're always having to fill out cue sheets and all those kinds of information that actually has songwriter splits. So you can include that as well. But metadata is super, super important, and that's going to be the first thing a supervisor is going to look at. If you send them a song and there's no artist name and there's no email address, they will probably delete it, even if they like it, which sucks. But it's just please, please, please make sure you have that before you send it out to anybody, because that's the #1 thing that we look for. And I think I touched up on samples briefly, but if you are a hip-hop artist or a DJ and you're using samples, it's so important to tell us if there are samples, and it's really important to tell us if one of the songs you're sending us is a cover. Because if you don't, I mean, we can't know all the songs in the world. Sometimes a song is a cover and we don't know it or we haven't heard it. And if we pitch it and somebody really likes it and we find out that it's a cover of some huge artist, we're not going to be able to clear it for the fees that we have. Therefore, the song won't get used. So it's really important to give us as much information as you can on those kinds of things. And obviously tell us if there's any other owners involved, if anyone owns the master, or if there's any other publishers attached.
Bang on. And then, yeah, as far as, you know, you get, as a lot of folks have already acknowledged, but recognizing that you probably get, you know, a ton of pitches every day, not all of those are going to get immediate attention, of course. How can someone, or how do you recommend someone follow up with you in a way that, you know, is professional and effective without being overbearing?
Yeah. So I would say if you sent somebody a pitch or you sent me your songs, I would follow up with maybe like 2 weeks later and just say, hey, thought I'd check in on this, see where you're at. because sometimes I download it and I forget to respond. And it's happened before where someone's followed up and I was like, oh yeah, I downloaded this. It's really great. Obviously, I will let anybody know if any placements are coming up. Even if it's being considered for something, I always like to tell the artist that we're either sending it or, you know, it's being considered. But yeah, I would say a couple weeks after is good to follow up once. But if you follow up too much or, you know, just keep sending material without any responses, it's not always professional. I think that, well, I deal with artists that create new music on the regular basis. And if I really like their music, I'm like, yeah, please send me songs anytime. And anytime they have new stuff, they usually send it to me, which is cool. But they don't ever follow up because they know that I'm going to be downloading it and I've worked with them before. But if I've never worked with somebody before, and the music doesn't really fit our series or I'm not really looking for anything like it, I'm pretty honest about it and I'll tell them and say, you know what, this is really cool, but like I'm not going to be able to use this as of right now, but if anything comes up, I'll definitely let you know. And at that point, I just wouldn't follow up again unless you have new material.
You have been very diplomatic and professional yourself already. Yeah, like I remember at a North by Northeast, probably 6 years ago or so, but there was a panel of like horror stories from the road, you know, what not to do when you're on tour. And I just find that when you get on the negative, it's often a better reminder or lesson learned than the positive. So, yeah, I guess without naming names or pointing any fingers, but tell us some of the things that people should avoid that you've encountered before that just did not lead anywhere positive. And there are a few of them listed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I just mentioned, following up too often can kind of get supervisors not answering the phone and just avoiding your emails and not responding, and that's not good because, I don't know, that's not really a relationship for anybody, and we don't like to do it, but it would be like the same person, like your ex-girlfriend calling you all the time. You know, you're just not going to answer the phone at some point because you just don't have the time to have the conversation that they want to have, and usually it's because the music's not appropriate or it's not really up to production quality, or I don't know, it could be a multitude of things, but yeah, definitely not following up too much because you don't want to annoy people is super important. MP3 attachments and emails is surprisingly something that still happens all the time. I've gotten emails from people who are like, I'm sending you my album, and then I'll get 6 emails of like MP3 attachments and it just bogs up my email, and I don't like it. Nobody likes it. It's just easier if it's in a download link, all going to one place, and I can just put it in my iTunes from there. So yeah, don't attach MP3s unless I know you and you're like, hey, I just finished the song. Like, that's cool. I don't mind. Like Andrew actually sent me an attachment last week and I was totally fine with it. And we were joking about it. So I don't care about that stuff. But if I don't know you or supervisors don't know you and you're reaching out for the first time, definitely don't attach MP3s. Yeah, emails. I talked about that earlier too. You want to make sure that you're being personal in them, so definitely do your research on who you're emailing. It's super important. And plus it just makes you look super professional. And yes, not including metadata, which till this day still happens. I was actually having a conversation with another music supervisor that I know who works in Los Angeles who does some really big projects, and he was sending out like a pitch to companies that he deals with on a regular basis, and some new as well. And in this email, it was like, make sure you include your metadata. And tons of people ended up submitting music that didn't have it. And we were both just joking about how it's 2016, and even though we put it in an email, people still don't read the emails and people still don't include the metadata. And we can't stress it enough about how important it is. It's not something to skip over. So that's definitely a do not want. And then pitches that have gone bad. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, people sometimes, if I request something to people I work with on a regular basis, and I'm giving them as much details as I can, like here's what I'm looking for. Sometimes I'll get pitches from people that are not what I'm looking for at all. And, they obviously want to get their music in something, and they're going to pitch what they have, or they're going to pitch what they own. And sometimes I feel like it's better to not pitch than to pitch something that doesn't work. Because then I just read it and I look at it and I'm like, this person has no idea what I'm looking for at all. Like, I'm not going to ask them next time. And, I really respect when people say, you know what, honestly, I don't have anything for that, but I do have this for you. So if you ever need it, let me know. I always really, really respect that. That's kind of that's one of the things that happens the most with pitches. But like I said, I've also had pitches where they sent it to the wrong person, or I've gotten a leaked song I shouldn't get. Just weird things happen all the time.
Mm-hmm. So a quick one, again, Alan, with Canadian Federation of Musicians, just, I suppose, reminding people that along with your metadata, you should let whoever you're pitching to know if it was recorded AFM, which helps. And I guess on the back of that, I thought we were jumping into questions. So keep them coming, folks. There's some great ones here, and we'll get to it momentarily. But yeah, I guess you can tell us a little bit about, obviously we're talking about people pitching to you, but it's in their interest to know when you've got time to yourself, and I know that you are scouring blogs. You've hooked me up with some good music. And
that's sweet.
Yeah, tell me a bit about your process, when you're going looking for something. Where are you looking? Who are you reaching out to? And then when you're approaching somebody, instead of them sending the first email, what does that process look like?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'll try not to talk about this too long, but everyone in our office here on a daily basis is always looking for music. So I know we all set aside a certain amount of time a day to scour the internet, whether that's SoundCloud, or sometimes I can go through a Spotify hole, or I look on regular blogs and websites. One of my favorites is Hype Machine. I go on there all the time. And another one I really like is called Hilly Dilly. They're always posting new music every single day of songs that were just posted on SoundCloud. And usually it's artists that own their material, but at the same time, it can be artists who are signed to labels. If I come across these types of songs and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so perfect for this show, I have to have this, I look up the band on either Facebook or their website and find an email address. So I can't stress enough to also have an email address somewhere, because if somebody wants to reach you and you don't have an email address, then it's kind of hard for us to do that. So yeah, we'll email and we'll say, hey, I'm a music supervisor in Toronto. We place music in TV and film. Here's some of the stuff we've worked on. I came across your song on such and such platform. Do you own your masters and your publishing? I just wanted to know what that looks like. And do you have a download link that you could send me? That's usually what the email sort of ends up looking like. And we've had a lot of success with that, where, artists come back. Some have been super conversational, and we'll be like, can I call you? And then I'm like, yeah. So they'll call me and we'll have a whole conversation, and they'll ask a ton of questions like everybody has, like, do you take a percentage? Are they non-exclusive deals? What are the fees like? Like all those kinds of things. And we get to know the artist, which is really cool. And then we can place them from there if it works. And we always hope that it will. And I like reaching out to artists. It's kind of one of my favorite things to do, minus receiving music from, the same regular people that we do on a daily basis. But yeah, I love blogs. I love artists. I love reaching out.
Excellent. Yeah, we wanted to keep folks for about an hour. And so I guess we'll kind of fast track to the questions. That's the value part. Yeah. I was hoping we'd have time to play the reel again, which I botched at the beginning, or technical difficulties botched at the beginning. But again, instinctentertainment.ca. Go check that out. You can find out a lot more about the company and Dondrea. But yeah, let's jump into the questions here. In summary, remember that there's a ton of opportunities available out there. Even if you're the jazz metal fusion band, shout out to Dillinger Escape Plan. There are opportunities for you. Identify the gatekeepers like Dondrea. Find out who it is you need to speak with for the opportunities that you're after. Target, hone in, don't be general. Like she was saying, be personal and stroke the ego a bit. Take good care of those professional relationships, because even if they don't produce fruit right off the bat, those seeds can always come to fruition later on. I guess this one, and some people have questions about this, but it's a good idea if you have an idea of how you can help a music supervisor enhance their projects. If you know that Dondrea and Instinct work on Degrassi and they often have school dance scenes there, and you've got a killer song that would get people going crazy, let her know that. And finally, don't get discouraged, whether or not something works out, or even if you don't hear back. Everybody's busy. There's no hard feelings. We're all trying to get our work done. And there's always opportunities. So let's jump to these questions here. We've got a ton. And actually, one of my favorites, I'll save that for last. First, do people pitching, do you care about lyrics? Do you want people to provide lyrics in any sense when they're pitching to you, or even when the process is underway? Is that important?
That's a super good question, actually. It's really good to have it aside, and it's actually that you can actually put it in the metadata as well. There's a section for lyrics, I think, somewhere. So you can put that actually in your metadata, but it's not something you need to pitch with your email. It's not like an attachment of a Word doc or anything that you need to give us. The only time we'll ever ask for it is if a producer's like, I can't really hear what that word is. Can you guys get the lyrics for us so we can just make sure that this is relevant? Or even if I'm pitching something and I'm like, I don't really know what this song is about and this scene's really important, I should probably get the lyrics just in case, then I'll ask. But it's not something you need to pitch in an email with your music by any means.
Right on. What about, do you like if someone reaches out and asks you what type of things you're working on or what type of music you're looking for instead of just sending you a song?
We get that question a lot, and usually our website or IMDb is going to talk about the projects that we're working on, so it will give you a really good idea as to what we are working on instead of asking me. It's always good, and not just me, but just supervisors in general. Another good thing is to look at their social media pages. Like, you can look at supervisors' Facebook pages for their company if they have one, or find them on Twitter. Sometimes there's supervisors who are like, I need a song like this, can anyone help me? And you can reply to them and give them your music. I don't recommend reaching out to supervisors on Twitter to connect with them necessarily and get their contact info, because that's just another way of like following up too much. But sometimes if you, I don't want to say stalk or creep these people, but sometimes people will talk about what they're working on or what they're looking for, and that's a really good way of doing the research. And I mean, sometimes I don't mind if those emails come through, and because it changes day to day. Like, sometimes I won't know I need a certain song until a producer asks for it. It might not even be in the script. It might just be random, and then I have a day or two to figure out what I need. So sometimes I don't mind the question. It changes, but I definitely would do the research onto like what specific projects we're doing ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. I hope you don't mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but someone's asking if they've co-written a song with other parties, do they add the other writer's contact info? Yes. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you can. If it's just like your friend, you can just put your email address, and then if I reach out to you and just be like, hey, I'm interested in using this song, I'll always ask, even if there's only one contact info, I'll just say, do I clear it all with you, or are there any other writers? Then you can tell me that so-and-so is also a writer, and you can give me their contact info then, and I can send the paperwork from there. But I mean, if you can include it, and that other person needs to actually like sign off on 50% of the song, then I would definitely add their contact info.
Phew, okay. If someone owns 100% of the publishing rights to a song that they didn't write, are they considered one stop?
So sorry, if a songwriter wrote a song but doesn't own
I guess
the
I should
master?
I'll ask verbatim. The question is, if I have 100% of the publishing rights to a song that I didn't write, am I considered quote unquote one stop?
Well, if you own 100% of the publishing but you didn't write it, how does that doesn't work out?
There is
like if yeah, so like 100% of the publishing means you wrote the song 100%.
Or if or I'm wondering if someone wrote the song and signed over, or can you not sign away your like songwriting credit?
Okay, so say you wrote the song with somebody else, or you wrote the song 100%, but it's not your song. Say it's somebody else's song that recorded it. So like you wrote a song for somebody. You would own 100% of the publishing, but you can't clear the master because you don't own the song. You're not the artist that owns the song. So that wouldn't be a one-stop. We would have to clear the master recording with the artist that recorded it because they own that recording. Mm-hmm. And then we'd have to clear the publishing with you as 100% of the writer. But you can, however, sign off a one-stop deal if your friend and you wrote a song. So like you can sign on behalf of your friend and just make sure that they get the payment. Like that's always an option. But yeah, if you wrote the song but you didn't record it yourself, then you're not considered a one-stop. You would just be clearing the publishing.
Okay, so 90 seconds here. I'm going to try to combine a few questions, but like if someone introduces themselves to you in a personal way, instead of linking you to a stream of their music, if they link you to, say, a Sonic Bids account or another EPK that's got music stream as well as a bit of background info, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, like Bandcamp doesn't bother me, but Reverb Nation shouldn't be used anymore as like a platform to pitch music. I don't think that it's necessarily the best use of streaming site. But yeah, I mean, like EPKs, we don't really need them or use them. So I would target all your pitching to supervisors the same and have either a SoundCloud streaming option or like a Bandcamp where they can stream your music. And Bandcamp allows you to have, you know, artist information and whatnot, but we don't really need EPKs.
Okay. I've got some geographic specific questions, which we'll skip over, unfortunately, in the interest of time. Let's see here. Yeah,
I'm not in a rush unless you absolutely have to end this.
Well, actually, we've never hit the full hour, so I don't know if we're going to get kicked out or anything. And I've had a couple of folks clarify with the question about the song. It might be that the song is a traditional tune or under public domain, where someone would own the masters but not the publishing to the original song. That could have been where the confusion came from with that earlier question.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to clear the publishing because it's public domain, but we could clear 100% of the master with whoever recorded it.
Okay. Oh yeah, there we go. Everyone, you guys can all still hear me, right? Because we passed the hour and the countdown just hit 0, but oh, there we go. Thanks, Melissa. Okay then, loud and clear. Hey, this is good. We can go past an hour, and people want to go past an hour. It looks like we. Yeah, Alan from CFM says he'll see you on Wednesday. This was
perfect.
This was the question I really, really liked. We've been talking a lot on behalf of the artists, but we do have some industry folks out there. Dondrea, how can someone become a music supervisor?
Very good question. Well, that depends. It's different for everybody, I think. It's well, I went to music industry arts program at Fanshawe, so I did learn a lot of music business. I don't think you necessarily have to go to school for music in order to get a job in this industry. I feel like sometimes it's people you know and how professional you hold yourself and how hard you work. And I mean, if you do go to school, it doesn't help, or it doesn't wrong you by any means. Like, you're going to learn things about the industry. But the industry is always changing, so it's good to meet as many people as you can and network and find the supervisors that you either really like from wherever you are, and, you know, go to industry events and just meet them and see if there's any type of internships or openings available. It's usually pretty tricky. But if you wanted to like freelance and do it yourself, then it's a matter of meeting producers and directors and learning at who's making films and projects in the area that will need supervisors. And it's hard as a freelancer because you kind of have to work pro bono at first because there's not a lot of money in smaller projects, and kind of just work your way up. But if you were to work for like an actual company, whether that's in advertising or a specific supervision company, then it would just be networking a lot and meeting those people and just waiting for an opening, kind of. And I always find putting together like your own little reel doesn't hurt. I did that. I found films that I really liked and I stripped the audio and I put different music on top of it, and I used that as like here's my own way of putting music to picture. Or I filmed things myself on a pro camera that I have, and then I practiced putting music to picture. Even if it was stuff I couldn't clear, it was just the practice of finding something that fits with the scene, so you can get that kind of experience.
Right on. That question, shout out to Ryan Catskills. He's been entertaining me throughout all of it, which has been lovely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he says his music IQ is beyond reproach. I think someone's asking about your opinion on Vapor Music. If I'm not mistaken, that's like another supervision firm in the city, eh?
Yes, it is. We know them very well.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, we don't work with them by any means, but they are other Canadian pals who do what we do in different platforms. They have different television series, and they're very good people. And I know that they've also started to work with artists as well. I don't know to what type of extent or scale, but I know that they're looking for new artists to work with, to pitch their music and kind of almost act like a record label, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to go on record and say that, but I know for a fact that they've started to do something like that, which is kind of cool. It's not just the supervision side. They're kind of looking into either owning songs or working with artists and like helping them with sync, which is really cool. But yeah, they're all really good people.
Well, then I guess we'll wrap it up with this. But the last question, Dondrea, if you don't mind disclosing for those that were attentive, but a few folks want to know, how can they be in touch with you following the session here?
Yeah. So please email me. I'm curious to know who is listening and who has music, because I'm always looking. Feel free to email me. It's my name, Dondrea, at instinctentertainment, all spelled out, .ca. So feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll have your contact info that way. And hopefully, I wouldn't necessarily do it right away. Maybe put together, like I said, your email, your pitch email of your music and whatnot, and make sure your metadata is all there. And yeah, you can connect with me that way. I'm on Twitter like way too much. I post a lot of music daily, what I'm listening to, what I like. I'm very interactive with Twitter. So you can definitely connect with me there. And my Twitter handle is Dondrea, which is DAWNZDREA, which I think the Canadian musician Twitter has been like posting about this webinar. So you can find my handle on there somewhere.
That we have. We are a CDN musician on Twitter. On the screen now, kind of complementing what we've been talking about. If you want to know more on this subject, head over to musicbooksplus.com/soundtrack. And we have selected a few titles that well, like I say, will just kind of add to what Dondrea and I have been discussing here. Ryan, can you fly to Toronto from Winnipeg and work for Instinct Entertainment? Start with the email.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then with that, we appreciate you joining us. For everyone that did, you'll get an email about 24 hours from now that'll have a link to the recorded version of the webinar for you to access at your convenience. And of course, nwcwebinars.com, like I said at the beginning, is the home base for all of the sessions that we do. And coming up next, I should plug, we're going to be doing something on music management. When do you need a manager? How can they benefit your career? How do you make sure that the partnership is mutually beneficial? Our mutual friend Tim Jones is joining us for that one. It'll be happening April 21st. Dondrea, thanks a ton for this. Tons of valuable info. Follow up with us, and we'll be back with more next month. nwcwebinars.com, instinctentertainment.ca.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for listening.